A cold December night in Courtland, Mississippi. A car engulfed in flames on a quiet country road. And a young girl, wearing only underwear, her entire body on fire, struggling to crawl away from a blaze before collapsing by the roadside. When police arrived, she was still alive. She tried to speak. Faint sounds escaped from her throat, burned over 90%. Eric. 20 minutes later, Jessica Chambers, 19, took her final breath. But her death was only the beginning of a legal nightmare that would last nearly a decade. No DNA, no eyewitnesses, no surveillance cameras, only vague clues, conflicting testimonies, and one suspect with a dark past named Quinton Tellis. He was just a friend of Jessica, but both of their phones pinged at the same location that night. And a few months later, Tellis was under investigation for stabbing another woman 30 times in Louisiana. 2 trials. 2 hung juries, no one convicted, no one acquitted, and the real killer might still be out there. This is the full story of the Jessica Chambers case, the girl burned alive in the darkness, leaving behind a mystery that no one has been able to solve. Courtland, Mississippi, a small, quiet, and close-knit town, was dragged into a nightmare on the night of December 6, 2014. That night, a car engulfed in flames on the side of Heron Road marked the beginning of one of the most brutal, complex, and haunting criminal cases in modern American history. At 8:07 p.m., the 911 dispatcher received a call from LaTroy Rudd and Glenn Williams. They reported a car fire in a remote, deserted area far from any residential homes, a dark, isolated stretch of land where any presence could be easily swallowed by the night. At 8:09 p.m., firefighters and police arrived on the scene. They found the vehicle engulfed in flames, with the most intense fire concentrated in the driver's cabin. The engine and trunk areas seemed mostly intact. Beside the vehicle, they discovered a charred piece of fabric lying silently among the ashes, like a strange remnant. As the fire crew prepared to put out the blaze, a horrifying scene suddenly emerged. From the brush nearby, a figure staggered into the light with arms outstretched. The person was wearing only scorched underwear, their body so severely burned they were almost unrecognizable. Skin was peeling, revealing raw, red flesh. The acrid smell of burning human flesh filled the air. Firefighters and police at the scene later described her as resembling a zombie from The Walking Dead. They backed their vehicles up and turned on their headlights, and then they saw that it was a young girl, barefoot, her body disfigured, her mouth struggling to form words in unbearable pain. Sheriff Cole, Hallie, was the first to approach her. She took shaky steps forward and weakly cried out, "Help me! Help me! Help me!" Without hesitation, Cole wrapped a blanket around her burned body to keep her from losing more heat and to protect her in her agonizing, exposed state. He gently guided her toward the fire truck's lights. She collapsed just a few steps away. Cole held her, asked her name, and reassured her that help was on the way. Despite suffering burns on 98% of her body, with her throat scorched and barely able to speak, Jessica still managed to whisper her name. Jessica. Jessica Chambers. Cole recognized her immediately. In a small town like Courtland, everyone knows each other. He asked, "Who did this to you?" One single word came out of her mouth, short, faint, and unclear. Cole thought she said Eric or Derek. A few others present heard the same. In that chaotic moment, all attention focused on the name she was trying so desperately to say, even though her voice was nearly gone. Her face showed the desperation of someone who could no longer fully express what they wanted to say. Sheriff Cole, Hallie quickly handed her a piece of paper, hoping she could write the name of her attacker. But Jessica's hands were no longer those of the living. Her burned skin had stiffened like leather, unmoving, her fingers trembling and unable to grasp anything. Notably, in her final agonizing moments, she also made a sound like, which led medical staff to think she might be trying to say cold, a final unconscious reaction from a body being overwhelmed by pain. In those fleeting moments near death, Jessica Chambers summoned every ounce of strength to pass on something, a name, a clue, a final chance to identify the monster who struck from within the darkness and flames. Those last faint whispers, unclear, incomplete, became the first fragile cornerstone of the investigation. but they were also the spark for years of debate, doubt, and winding paths that never led to closure. That's how this case began, with a burned body, a name barely spoken, and a nightmare that would haunt a once peaceful small town forever. Jessica Kane Chambers was born on February 2, 1995, in Clarksdale, Mississippi. She grew up in a poor rural area of the American South, where childhood wasn't painted with green meadows, but rather shrouded in drug arrests, divorces, and lives that derailed too early. Jessica was the daughter of Ben and Lisa. When she was just 3 years old, her parents divorced. Her father, Ben Chambers, later remarried, forming a large blended family with many biological and step-siblings. But behind the appearance of a big family was a childhood full of cracks. Ben had once been convicted for producing methamphetamine, a past that, although he later turned his life around and became a mechanic for the local police department, still cast a long shadow over Jessica's image in the town. A child growing up between two extremes, on one side a history of crime, on the other law enforcement, rarely found true peace. Jessica was raised in Courtland, a remote town with a population of just around 526 people. People there often proudly said, "Here everybody knows everybody." But that familiarity was sometimes just a mask for a deeply troubled society. Courtland had a crime rate said to be 49% higher than the national average. Drugs, violence, and criminal records were everyday occurrences, to the point where someone once said, "In Courtland, if you've never been arrested, you're in the minority." That was the environment Jessica grew up in, and within it, she gradually lost her way. In high school, Jessica Chambers was a bright star. She was captain of the cheerleading team, smart, lively, and energetic. But everything changed in 2012 when her brother, also named Ben, died in a car accident. That death didn't just take away a brother, it also took the emotional balance that Jessica had struggled to maintain. Friends said she was no longer the same vibrant girl. After graduating, she worked at a convenience store but also started hanging out with the wrong crowd, getting involved with marijuana use and small-time dealing. There were reports that she had once been arrested for drug-related offenses, but what stood out was that, despite her downward spiral, Jessica was still described by her friends as someone very well-loved, kind, and always willing to help others. A girl who could be both behind the cashier's counter and hiding in a car to exchange illegal substances, two parallel lives in one identity that hadn't yet fully matured. At the time of her murder, Jessica was dating Travis Sanford, a 28-year-old man nearly 10 years older than her. But Travis was serving time in prison and couldn't be by her side. People who were once close to Jessica said that even though she had a boyfriend, her personal life was still messy and unclear. Maybe that's why she was vulnerable and too trusting of the wrong people. When Jessica Chambers took her final breath at a Memphis hospital on the morning of December 7, 2014, just hours after being found with burns covering 98% of her body, Panola County authorities immediately knew they were dealing with a savage murder case, something rarely seen in a quiet town like Courtland. But the deeper they investigated, the more they realized the identity of the killer wouldn't be uncovered through a simple fingerprint or a clear security camera image. The first lead took them back to Jessica's closest relative, her mother, Lisa Chambers. Lisa recalled vividly that around 5 p.m., Jessica left the house, saying she was going to get gas and would be back soon. But she never came home. Later texts and calls went unanswered. The phone that had been the last link between mother and daughter suddenly went silent, as if someone had deliberately cut off all communication. The next lead brought investigators to the Mandam First Stop convenience store, a popular hangout spot for local youth in Courtland. There they spoke with Ali Alini, a 19-year-old employee and the last known person to see Jessica alive. Ali provided surveillance footage from around 5:30 p.m., showing Jessica smiling and friendly, neatly dressed, chatting with him, paying for gas, and then leaving. It seemed like a vital piece of the puzzle. But in the age of social media, the last person to see a victim is often the first to be cast under suspicion. Rumors spread quickly that Ali was Middle Eastern, that he was a gang leader, that he had killed this young American woman for some unknown reason. However, nothing in the video showed any suspicious behavior. Ali fully cooperated with investigators, provided all necessary information, and even expressed a strong desire to find the real perpetrator to clear his name. After thorough verification, District Attorney John Champion publicly stated that Ollie was not involved in the case and had a solid alibi. When forensic doctors at Regional 1 Hospital examined Jessica's body, they discovered a disturbing burn pattern. Jessica wasn't only burned on the outside. Traces of gasoline were found in her mouth and airway. This horrifying fact revealed that she had been forced to swallow or inhale fuel before being set on fire. Police also found a charred bra with gasoline residue. This was no accidental fire. It was a deliberate act of immolation, executed with an exceptionally cruel intent. About 400 meters from the scene, a local resident named Jerry King discovered Jessica's car keys lying in the grass. When tested for DNA, the keys revealed the genetic material of 4 different men. One of them was Quinton Tellis. However, as investigators noted, Jessica often gave people rides in her car, so finding DNA on the keys wasn't enough to charge anyone. The only thing Jessica was able to utter while dying was a name that sounded like Eric or Derek. Based on that whispered clue, police widened the investigation, screening nearly 500 men named Eric or Derek in the surrounding counties. One of them was Derek Holmes, a man with a serious criminal record, including charges related to the exploitation of minors. But Derek presented an alibi. He was home caring for his diabetic mother, which was confirmed. He was removed from the list of suspects. Police also questioned Jessica's boyfriend, Travis Sanford, who was serving a prison sentence at the time. One theory suggested that Travis might have hired someone to kill Jessica out of jealousy. But when investigators met him, they saw that he was genuinely shocked and devastated by the news of her death. With a solid alibi, he was ruled out as a suspect. Even Jessica's father, Ben Chambers, became the subject of public speculation due to his criminal past and previous remarks opposing interracial relationships. However, Ben publicly denied any ill will, firmly stating that he bore no hatred toward anyone and could never harm his own daughter. From the convenience store to the car keys found in the grass, from the vague name Jessica whispered to the baseless rumors spreading throughout the community, every lead seemed to end in a dead end. There was no direct DNA, no eyewitness, no murder weapon, no camera capturing the fatal moment. And if the killer is still out there, they've left behind a haunting mystery that continues to torment an entire town. Nearly a month had passed since that fateful night on December 6th, 2014, and Jessica Chambers' case remained a standstill. That is, until an old, seemingly unimportant cell phone led investigators to a name that had never come up before: Quinton Tellis. Jessica's phone was found near the crime scene, and much of its data was recoverable from the SIM card and internal memory. When forensic analysts traced the history of messages, calls, and GPS locations, a completely new picture began to emerge. There was no one named Eric or Derek in her contacts, but there was an unnamed number, and the person behind it had been in frequent contact with Jessica in the week leading up to her murder. The more they read, the more investigators discovered text exchanges that weren't just intimate, but also filled with tension and imbalance. "I'm horny," the man texted. Jessica replied, "Oh my God," and reminded him that his mother and sister were at home, and they would go crazy if they found out. The man messaged again the next day, this time with a tone implying a sexual exchange in return for money or food. Jessica was clearly uncomfortable, but she still kept in contact. This led police to believe it wasn't just a simple friendship. From that phone number, police traced a completely new name: Quinton Tellis. He had been questioned by police early in the case, but at the time, he claimed he was just friends with Jessica and never mentioned the sexual messages or any kind of intimate relationship. When confronted with the phone data, Quinton was forced to change his statement. He admitted that the two of them had had sex in Jessica's car in a field behind his house. He even described how he had to recline the seat afterward, a detail that matched the scene where the passenger seat was found reclined. But Quinton insisted on one point: he didn't meet Jessica the night she died. When asked about the night of December 6th, when the crime occurred, Quinton said he had gone to Walmart in Batesville to buy a debit card, which he later sent to his girlfriend in Louisiana. He claimed that he only found out about Jessica's death after returning home, and deleted all their messages because he didn't want to be involved. This action made investigators even more suspicious. With no cameras and no witnesses, police turned to cell phone location data. And what they found was shocking. Jessica's and Quinton's phones were recorded in the same area in Batesville just before she was killed. When confronted, Quinton changed his statement once again. This time, he said he was with a friend named Big Mike, and the two happened to run into Jessica at Taco Bell, where he gave her $10 and some marijuana. But Big Mike was never found. 3 times he changed his story. Text messages with sexual undertones. Deleted data right after the victim was killed. GPS showed the two were near each other at the critical time. And finally, Quinton Tellis had a criminal record and was later charged with murdering another woman in Louisiana. All of this turned Quinton from a potential witness into the prime suspect. The Jessica Chambers case moved into a new phase with a specific name, a real person, and a string of inconsistencies too serious to ignore. But that didn't mean justice was about to be served, because what happened next in the courtroom turned out to be an even more complicated story. More than a year after the shocking death of Jessica Chambers, the 19-year-old girl who was burned alive in the middle of the night in Mississippi, the name Quinton Tellis was officially indicted. On February 24, 2016, he was charged with capital murder. And by October 2017, the first trial opened in Batesville. The courtroom was packed with widespread media presence. Everyone was waiting to see who justice would call out. Under the direction of District Attorney John Champion, the prosecution began presenting a chain of arguments carefully built over more than a year of investigation. Their main focus was on phone data and the defendant's initial lies. Champion emphasized that Quinton had not been truthful with the police from the start about his whereabouts, his relationship with Jessica, and even about the sexually explicit messages found on the victim's phone. He initially denied any intimate involvement, but later admitted to having had sex with her and even described the position of the car seat, a detail that matched the condition of the burned car. To the prosecution, these ever-changing statements were clear signs of concealment. The prosecution's strongest piece of evidence was the phone location data. Analyst Paul Roulette demonstrated that both Quinton's and Jessica's phones had pinged at the same time in 3 locations: the Mandem store where Jessica was last seen, the field behind Quinton's house, where they were believed to have had intimate relations, and the defendant's residence. Although Quinton claimed he had gone to the Walmart in Batesville to buy a prepaid card at the time of the murder, cell phone data showed he had enough time to commit the crime and then drive there afterward. The prosecution painted a chilling scenario. Quinton rendered Jessica unconscious, possibly through suffocation or physical assault, then returned home to get gasoline, went back to the scene, poured it over her still-living body, and set her on fire. Then, as if nothing had happened, he went to Walmart, bought a card to send to his girlfriend to create an alibi. No DNA, no murder weapon, no eyewitnesses. But every detail from phone data to lies to the position of the car seat, all, according to the prosecution, pointed to one person. Defense attorney Darla Palmer didn't sit quietly. She hit back at the prosecution by targeting the biggest weakness in the case: the lack of direct evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints, no surveillance confirming Quinton at the scene. And she did not hesitate to remind everyone of what the public could not forget: Jessica's final words in agony: Eric or Derek. Palmer began to sow doubt. If Jessica had enough strength to clearly say her name, Jessica Chambers, why wouldn't she be able to say the full name of her killer if it really were Quinton Tellis? She emphasized that Jessica and Quinton knew each other, and she would have known his name very well. As for the phone data, Palmer argued that it wasn't precise. Courtland is a small town with few cell towers, and pinging in the same area doesn't prove exact physical presence at a specific spot. Even the prosecution's expert had to admit this under cross-examination. The defense also brought up the alibi to cast doubt. According to the receipt, Quinton purchased a debit card at Walmart at either 7:53 or 7:58 p.m., just minutes after the 911 call reporting Jessica's burning car was logged. Given the distance between the two locations, carrying out such a brutal murder and then appearing at Walmart on time was deemed nearly impossible. Ms. Palmer concluded the prosecution did not have enough to convict. What they had was only speculation. The jury was sent to deliberate. They returned not once, but 3 times. Each time with the same result, a deadlock. Some said guilty, then changed their minds. Some doubted, some were certain, but none could convince the others. Eventually, the judge declared mistrial. No one was convicted. No one was acquitted. Everything was left unresolved. Quinton Tellis was not set free. He remained in custody, but not for Jessica. He was extradited to Louisiana, where another trial awaited him in the death of Quinton Tellis, a Taiwanese student who was stabbed to death and then set on fire. As for Jessica Chambers, the 19-year-old girl who emerged from a blaze like a scene from a horror movie and tried to name her killer, the truth has yet to be confirmed. The trial ended, but justice has yet to deliver its final word. Will this case be retried, or will it forever fade into silence? And where is the line between circumstantial evidence and certainty in a murder case as horrifying as this? After the failure of the first trial, the hope of bringing Quinton Tellis to justice never died. On September 24, 2018, a new trial was held in Mississippi. This time, all eyes were once again on the same unanswered question: is there enough evidence to convict Tellis? The second trial repeated nearly all the arguments from the previous one, the same witnesses, the phone data, movement timeline, lies. Everything was re-examined, but the prosecution didn't stop there. They had a new card to play. Dr. William Hickerson, a renowned burn expert and the physician who directly treated Jessica at the Memphis hospital, took the witness stand. With a confident voice, he stated, "In a condition where 93% of the body is burned and the airway is severely damaged, Jessica Chambers could not possibly have clearly spoken a name. The pain was too overwhelming for any meaningful communication." That was the medical conclusion. So the Eric or Derek the first responders thought they heard, could it have been a distorted cry of pain mistaken for a name? The prosecution also presented another detail. Bruises were found on Jessica's body, not caused by fire. Experts believed she may have been struck or rendered unconscious before being set on fire, which explained the absence of any attempt to flee or cry for help. It was another puzzle piece reinforcing the theory of a premeditated murder. And yet, despite reinforcing the case with medical evidence, despite attacking the defense's strongest point, the final result was the same as before: a deadlocked jury. 6 jurors believed Quinton was guilty. 6 did not. Another trial, once again without a conclusion. Quinton Tellis, for the second time, was neither convicted nor acquitted. The case remained suspended, caught between both shores of justice. And then another door opened. Far from Mississippi, in Monroe, Louisiana, a different city, a different victim, but the same name, Quinton Tellis. On August 8, 2015, police discovered the heavily decomposed body of a 34-year-old woman in her apartment. The victim was Quinton Tellis, also known as Mandy, a Taiwanese student who was quiet and kind. The autopsy revealed she had been stabbed at least 30 times, and her body had been left inside the apartment for nearly 10 days. From a prescription slip for painkillers left in Mandy's apartment, issued by Walmart, investigators traced back to a surveillance video showing her handing the paper to a black man seated in a black car. After Mandy's death, her debit card continued to be used to withdraw money from an ATM, and surveillance cameras captured the same man again. The license plate led police to a familiar name, Quinton Tellis. When questioned, Quinton denied any involvement in Mandy's death. At first, he was only charged with unauthorized use of a deceased person's bank card. But then, a turning point emerged. A man called the Crime Stoppers hotline and claimed that Quinton had confessed to torturing Mandy to get her PIN number, then killing her. Based on that testimony, Quinton Tellis was officially indicted for second-degree murder in Louisiana. However, justice didn't come immediately. The state of Louisiana agreed to delay Mandy's trial while Mississippi handled the Jessica Chambers case. But when Mississippi failed twice to convict Tellis, Louisiana still couldn't proceed. In November 2022, Judge Larry Jefferson officially dismissed the murder indictment against Quinton Tellis in the Quinton Tellis case, not because he was exonerated, but because Mississippi wanted him to serve a 5-year sentence for other charges: tampering with evidence and lying to investigators in the Jessica Chambers case. This means Louisiana has not given up, only paused, stepping aside for the neighboring state's judgment. But the truth remains: neither the Jessica nor the Mandy case has a final resolution. 2 murders, 2 different states, 1 primary suspect, yet no conviction. Still, there are unanswered questions. Still, there are wounds left unhealed. And as time passes, justice still seems to hang in the same fire from years ago, suspended, painful and never truly extinguished. The repeated delays in the Jessica Chambers case revealed the overlaps and unpredictability of the U.S. justice system. Tellis, though never convicted of murder, still had to remain in prison for offenses related to Jessica's case. And Louisiana, despite receiving indirect testimony that he had confessed to killing Mandy, still could not reopen the trial without approval from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. In both murder cases across two different states, there was one chilling similarity. No DNA evidence, no eyewitnesses, only a series of vague puzzle pieces. A phone that pinged in the same area. An ATM camera that didn't clearly show a face. An anonymous confession. All of it made the case feel like a recurring nightmare, where justice stands still amid doubt. District Attorney John Champion once said something memorable. We don't have an eyewitness. We don't have DNA. But we have a chain of circumstantial evidence that, if seen the right way, tells the whole story of the crime. But the defense responded with an equally pointed statement. Attorney Darla Palmer said, when you don't have physical evidence, everything else is just speculation. And a death sentence cannot be based on speculation. It was a battle between the trust in investigative instinct and the strict legal principle that a person can only be convicted when there is no reasonable doubt. But it wasn't just the justice system that suffered from this deadlock. The deepest wounds were borne by the victims' families, especially Jessica Chambers' mother. In 2021, Lisa Chambers passed away in the hospital. No cause of death was publicly stated, but those who knew her understood. For 7 years after her daughter's murder, she never had a single peaceful night's sleep. She had already lost her son Ben in a car accident. Then, with Jessica, she had to listen as doctors described burns covering over 90% of her daughter's body. She had to sit through trial after trial, look at autopsy photos, and hear experts recount how her daughter had been burned alive. No conviction, no clear answers, and no apology that could ever make up for it. The story of Jessica Chambers, a 19-year-old girl burned alive on a cold Mississippi night, and Ming Chun Siao, a quiet graduate student, stabbed to death in her own apartment. Two unrelated lives, but both ended in despair. And between them stands one name, Quinton Tellis. And to this day, though imprisoned for lesser charges, Tellis has never been convicted of murder. Justice is not a feeling. Is truth proven beyond doubt? But for that very reason, in many cases, it becomes almost impossible to achieve. And for Jessica and Mandy, the full truth is still waiting to be told. What do you think will happen next? Will Mississippi hold a third trial? Will Louisiana retry Tellis? Or will this remain an unsolved mystery forever? Leave a comment below. And if you want to keep following this series, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next episode of The Unfinished Files.